The cause of economic insecurity and how it can be overcome must be made clear to all classes of the public in language that each can understand in order that America may await the orderly solution of the problem and not in despair turn over its freedom in exchange for the vain promises of a self-proclaimed Messiah. And that's what we've done. So that's the connection between the economy and democracy. My name is Nina Banks. I'm an associate professor at Bucknell University. My areas of research would be family migration and social reproduction. I tend to focus on the work of African American women. Most recently, I've been looking at the economics of Sadie Alexander. Sadie Alexander was the first African-American economist in the United States. She spent her life as a lawyer, and most of the research on Sadie Alexander deals with her life as an attorney. I became interested in her when I started teaching a course on African-American feminist thought, and I realized that she continued to have an engagement with economic ideas. So that has really been my mission, has been trying to bring her economics back into economic analysis. And that's a project of feminist economics to restore the writings of our early women economists. She was very concerned about the increase in unemployment and the tendency for businesses to fire black workers, black men, for example, people who had been hired more recently as a result of World War II. And so she was concerned that white workers would start to lash out against black workers, that they would perceive black workers as competitors for their jobs, that white workers tended to have a sense of entitlement with respect to jobs in the economy. So she really began to argue that black and white workers should band together, should organize through labor unions for higher wages. And ultimately that led her to argue in favor of the federal government having a full employment program, because she really believed that the root of economic insecurity and the root of social problems in the United States were tied to unemployment. That unemployment was, really the center or the central issue that concerned workers in the country, and that if we were able to deal with the problem of economic insecurity, then the social problems would also be resolved. If we look over the last 40 years and the decline or the decimation of unions in the United States, and we see the implications in terms of the rise of economic insecurity, and the full manifestation of that in the recent election of Donald Trump. Some economists who would argue that if we had a federal job guarantee, then it would certainly lessen competition among workers over jobs. They wouldn't be limited, and we wouldn't see the kind of ugliness that we have witnessed and we are going to continue to witness as a result of the election of Donald Trump. So I think it's very, very relevant. And the argument, of course, is that the federal government should redistribute resources into public works programs so that people who want to have a job or able to work can do so. What's interesting about African American women's economic history is that we have a long period of working outside of our households in order to support the communities. Even after slavery ended, African American women were working outside of the household to a larger degree than other women, native-born as well as immigrant European women. African American women who were married in particular had higher labor force participation rates compared to other women. Her argument was that with the rise of the market, that household work came to be devalued as work. It was no longer regarded as productive. And so for me, what was fascinating about that is that she wrote it in 1930, and those were ideas that I came across as a graduate student in the 1990s. So in many ways, she was ahead of her time. So if we go back over the last 20 years or so, as feminist economists have been arguing for the need to try to assign value to that work. Earlier than that, of course, there was the argument that it is work, that the activities that women disproportionately perform within the household, that's work. I think feminist economists, and this is still a challenge, have been trying to figure out how to quantify that. I still think that there's a lot of need for engaging in qualitative analysis because some of that work simply can't be quantified. In the work that I'm doing right now, I'm extending the focus of unpaid work beyond the household to the realm of the community because that's where women of color are performing a lot of unpaid work in support of their communities. And they're engaging in activities to benefit the community, challenging racial oppression, challenging unwanted land usage with respect to environmental problems, environmental racism, for example. And so if we look at that work, the work that they're performing, and I define it as work, we tend to think of it as political, but I'm arguing that it's work. I can't imagine how we would quantify a reduction in racism. Quantifying it would, in many ways, undervalue it, continue to undervalue the work that's performed and the benefits to the community. Many of our social problems are tied to lack of jobs, because having a job is more than just having a paycheck. It's also about self-esteem and identity. So I think that the value of increasing access to work in communities goes beyond having a paycheck. Many people, many women who are engaged in unpaid work are trying to provide for the community with respect to things that the market have not sufficiently provided or the state. And so if people have access to earnings or higher earnings, then certainly that would probably alleviate some of the need for engaging in unpaid activities. If I think about it in terms of policing African American communities, my sense is that if more people had access to jobs, that would decrease the tendency for the police to be there in mosques, for example, and so African American women, could turn their productive energies to something else besides organizing against police brutality. They could be able to work somewhere else and have a different quality of life, one that wasn't focused on challenging an oppressive system.